The sky was an unforgiving gray the morning of my mother's funeral, and as I stood in front of the church, dressed in black, clutching a bouquet of white lilies with trembling hands, I prayed I would not have to see her. Sabrina, my younger sister, the woman who had stolen my fiancé Derek, like a thief in the night, then paraded him around town as if she had won some great prize. It had been 5 years since I last saw them, 5 years since they gutted my life, and walked away hand in hand, leaving me to pick up the pieces. But this was not about them. This was about my mother, Eleanor Lawrence, the only person who had stayed by my side when my world collapsed. Still, when the black BMW pulled into the parking lot and Sabrina stepped out arm in arm with Derek, my stomach twisted. Her high heels clicked on the pavement like a warning siren. She wore a fitted designer dress, far too glamorous for a funeral, a diamond necklace sparkling at her throat, and that ring, my ring, glinting proudly on her left hand. My chest burned. They walked in smiling heads held high, soaking in the whispers, and stares like it was their red carpet moment. And the worst part, people were hugging her, kissing her cheek, acting as though she had not ripped our family apart like a hurricane. No one knew the truth, or maybe they did and just did not care. My father sat hunched in the front pew, his eyes bloodshot from grief, oblivious to the fact that his younger daughter had been the architect of his older daughter's heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to drag Sabrina by her overpriced dress and throw her out of the church. But I stayed quiet, because my mother, God bless her, would have wanted peace, not a scene. She had always believed in grace over revenge. But I was not my mother. Not anymore. As Sabrina made her way down the aisle, flashing a smug smile in my direction, she had no idea who was sitting 3 rows behind me. And she certainly did not know I had brought my husband with me, the man whose very presence would make Derek wish he had never betrayed me. 5 years before that funeral, my life looked perfect on paper. I was 30 years old, living in a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a skyline view. I was the youngest marketing director in my firm's history, pulling in 6 figures and respected across the industry. But behind the polished image was a dull ache I could never quite shake. I had love, but not the kind that filled you up. I had friends, but most of them talked behind each other's backs. I had ambition, but no one to dream with. Then I met Derek Morgan. He was the keynote speaker at a tech fundraiser my company sponsored. And when I say the room shifted when he walked in, I mean it quite literally. Every woman turned her head, and he turned his right to me. He was 36, a self-made millionaire, with a tailored suit, perfect posture, and confidence that did not need to shout. Derek had that slick charisma, like a movie character you wanted to trust, but should not. I fell for it anyway. He courted me like I was the only woman alive, lavish dates, weekend trips to Napa, surprise gifts delivered to my office. He remembered my favorite flowers, my coffee order. He charmed my parents. He even made my cynical coworkers swoon. After a year, he proposed under the stars on a private rooftop with a 5-carat diamond ring and a speech that made my knees go weak. I said yes before he finished the sentence. My mother cried happy tears, and my father hugged him like a son. My little sister Sabrina clapped and smiled and called me lucky. I thought she meant it. That's the part that still twists the knife. I chose her as my maid of honor. I invited her into every part of the planning. She smiled through fittings, tastings, tours. And all the while she was setting the stage to ruin me. Looking back, the signs were there: too many compliments to Derek, too many lingering touches, too much interest in details that had nothing to do with her. But I ignored it. I believed in my sister. I believed in him. And that blind faith cost me everything. Do you know what it feels like to see your life shattered by the people you trusted most? Drop a comment if betrayal ever blindsided you, and subscribe if you want more stories that remind us we are not alone. Your support helps me create more content like this. Thank you for being here. Planning the wedding should have been the happiest season of my life, but instead it became a silent war. I did not even realize I was losing. At first, everything felt magical. Derek and I were flooded with congratulatory texts, champagne deliveries, and invitations to speak at charity galas as the power couple of the season. My mother and I spent weekends flipping through bridal magazines and touring historic venues, while Sabrina offered help with a strange enthusiasm that in hindsight makes me sick. She insisted on accompanying me to vendor appointments I could not make, claiming it was just to support her favorite sister. When I walked into the bakery one afternoon and found her already there laughing with Derek over cake samples, I chalked it up to coincidence. When she offered to coordinate flower arrangements, because Derek said I have better taste in color palettes, I let it slide. I even excused her constant invasive texts. What kind of heels are you wearing to your rehearsal dinner? What perfume are you picking? What shade of lipstick? I thought she just wanted everything to be perfect for me. How naive I was. The first real crack appeared the night Derek canceled our cake tasting. It had been on the calendar for months. He claimed an emergency meeting with a potential investor came up, but suggested Sabrina join me instead. She already knows what I like. That phrase echoed in my head all night. Why would she know his cake preferences better than I did? I tried brushing it off, told myself I was being oversensitive. But deep down, a tension had begun tightening in my chest, a knot I could not explain away. Days later, while cleaning out Derek's car before a dinner party, I found a sapphire earring wedged between the seat cushions. A single drop earring, delicate and silver one, I had seen Sabrina wear at our engagement party. My stomach flipped. When I confronted Derek, he was calm. Too calm. He said he had given her a ride to the florist, her car was in the shop. She told me she lost an earring that day, he added like he had rehearsed the line. I called Sabrina. Her story matched his word for word. It was almost impressive how perfectly aligned their lies were. That night, I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind spinning. Was I being paranoid? Or had something been happening right under my nose? I began losing weight. My sleep shattered by dreams of whispers and betrayal. I booked a therapy session without telling Derek. I could not talk to my mother, she adored them both. I was starting to unravel, and neither of them noticed. Or worse, maybe they did, and just did not care. 3 weeks before the wedding, Derek told me we should postpone. He said I seemed off, that I had changed, that I was not myself anymore. I remember standing in our kitchen, holding a glass of water, trying not to let it slip from my trembling hands. I asked him if he still loved me. He looked at me with empty eyes and said, "Of course I do." But his voice was flat, lifeless. That night, I could not shake the feeling that everything was slipping through my fingers, and I did not even know what I had done wrong. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up alone. Dare I still cared. Remind him of the woman he fell in love with. His secretary looked stunned when I arrived, eyes darting nervously to his closed office door. "He is in a meeting," she said. He specifically asked not to be disturbed. I smiled tightly and said, "That's okay. I will wait." She moved to block me, but I brushed past her and opened the door. What I saw shattered me. Derek was leaning against his desk, hands wrapped around Sabrina's waist. She had her arms looped around his neck. They were kissing like it was something they had done 100 times before. Her skirt was pushed up. His tie was loosened. They did not even notice me at first. When the door shut behind me, they jumped apart, their faces morphing from passion to panic. Rebecca, Derek said no, stammered as he straightened his clothes. "This is not what it looks like." Sabrina did not even try. She lifted her chin and said, "We did not mean for this to happen." My voice was steady. "How long?" Derek looked at Sabrina. She answered, "Since your engagement party." I stood there surrounded by the remains of a life I thought was mine, and realized it had been stolen piece by piece behind my back, while I planned a future that never truly existed. I left the lunch bag on the floor. I left my heart on that carpet. And I left them both in that office, with the stench of betrayal hanging in the air. I do not remember the drive home. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, the lunch bag Derek never touched, still sitting in the passenger seat. I remember walking into my apartment and collapsing onto the cold tile of my bathroom floor, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I called my mother, but I could not speak, only sobbed, until she and my father arrived, using their spare key. My mother held me like I was 5 years old again, stroking my hair, while I choked out the truth between gasps of pain. My father paced the living room, jaw clenched, hand to his chest, muttering, "I'll kill him. I'll kill them both." For the next week, I existed in a haze. My mother canceled the wedding vendors, one by one, her voice trembling as she told florists and caterers the celebration was no longer happening. My father called Derek's lawyer to handle the return of the ring. I did not want to see Derek. I left the ring with the doorman at his building, only to find out later that Sabrina had already moved in. My photos had been taken down. Her shoes sat neatly by the door. My things were boxed up like they were garbage. A mutual friend confessed reluctantly that people had seen them together long before I caught them. "I thought you knew," she said, eyes downcast. "They were close." I lost my appetite. I stopped answering my phone. Even my boss, usually so cold and results-driven, called me in and gently suggested I take some time off. "Get out of Boston," she said. "Start fresh. Do not let them bury you here." It was not until I stumbled across a job opening in Chicago that something sparked in me. A senior marketing director position. I applied on a whim, telling myself I had nothing to lose. The interview flew by in a blur. 2 weeks later, I was packing up the life I had once built with Derek, only this time for myself. My mother helped me wrap dishes and frame photos, while my father taped boxes and carried them down to the car. That night, while folding sweaters, my mother asked me, "Do you think you can ever forgive her?" I shook my head. "Not now. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness is not about them," she said gently. "It is about setting yourself free." I looked around my half-empty apartment. I am setting myself free. I am moving to Chicago. As I drove away from the only city I had ever called home, I felt something shift inside me. It was not healing, not yet. But it was the beginning. A seed of something stronger than pain, not forgiveness, not closure, power. My story would not end in that office. It would not end with betrayal. I would rebuild not despite what they did, but because of it. And one day I would make them regret ever thinking they broke me. Chicago greeted me with cold wind and unfamiliar streets, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without suffocating on memory. My studio apartment was small, sterile, and smelled faintly of paint, but it was mine. No one else had touched the walls, no one else had left fingerprints on the windows. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office to avoid going home to the silence. I answered every email, volunteered for the hardest projects, and turned my pain into ambition so sharp it made me stand out. My boss noticed. So did clients. I started getting called into bigger meetings. My name began to carry weight. But despite all the success, I still locked the bathroom door every night out of habit, and I still flinched when I heard a phone buzz. Then came the tech conference in San Francisco. I was there to represent my agency, pitch a new campaign, and try not to think about how Derek and Sabrina were probably sipping champagne in their Beacon Hill townhouse. On the second night, I was seated at a long dinner table filled with investors and CEOs. That was where I met Lucas Foster. He was nothing like Derek, no slick smile, no grand gestures, just a quiet confidence and eyes that actually listened. He asked about my work, my ideas, not just my title. We ended up talking for hours over wine, debating digital trends, like it was some intellectual duel. I gave him my business card without thinking much of it. But the next morning, an email waited in my inbox. "Would you like to continue our conversation over coffee? No pressure." I said yes. Over the next few months, Lucas and I kept in touch. We referred clients to each other, exchanged ideas, built something solid out of nothing but respect. Madison, the HR director at my firm, noticed our lunch meetings and teased me constantly. "Colleagues do not look at each other like that," she said once, nudging me with her elbow. I denied it, but I felt it. Still, I was terrified. Love had betrayed me. Love had humiliated me. Love had made a fool of me. So when Lucas asked me to dinner one night, an actual date, no business excuse, I almost canceled. Twice. I forced myself to go. 20 minutes into the meal, he asked what my favorite childhood book was. I had a panic attack. My hands trembled. My throat closed. The memories clawed up from inside me like they wanted to suffocate me. But Lucas did not flinch. He moved to sit beside me, not across, spoke softly until my breathing slowed. He drove me home without questions. The next morning, a bouquet of sunflowers sat on my desk with a note: no pressure, no expectations, just hoping you're okay. Lucas. That was the moment everything changed. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to imagine that maybe love was not the enemy. Maybe love could look different. Maybe this time it could be safe. After that night, I stopped running from the idea of love, and I started walking slowly, carefully toward it. Lucas never rushed me. He never pushed for more than I could give. Instead, he built something steady between us, a space where trust could bloom again. He remembered the things that mattered, the way I hated loud restaurants, the exact amount of oat milk I liked in my coffee, how I always cried during true crime documentaries, even when I pretended not to. Our relationship grew not through grand gestures, but through small, deliberate acts of care. On our fifth date, instead of taking me to a trendy rooftop bar, he cooked dinner at his apartment. The lights were low, music soft, and when I flinched at the sound of a wine cork popping, he immediately stopped and said, "We do not have to open it." He never made me feel broken. He made me feel human. A year into my new life in Chicago, I barely recognized the woman I had been. I had been promoted to vice president of strategy, overseeing projects I once dreamed about. My circle of friends expanded beyond Madison to include people who knew me not as the girl who got cheated on, but simply as Hannah. But the universe has a strange sense of humor. During a dinner party with Lucas and several investors, someone mentioned Derek Morgan's name. "Oh yeah," a venture capitalist laughed, swirling his whiskey. "Foster and Morgan used to compete hard back in the day. Until Foster backed the right horse, and Morgan's startup sank like a stone." I froze fork halfway to my mouth. I turned to Lucas, who met my gaze calmly. Later that night in our kitchen, I asked, "How well did you know Derek?" He sighed. "I was going to tell you eventually. I knew who you were when we met. Not everything, just that you had once been engaged to him. I never planned any of this." I stepped back, stunned. "So you knew all along, yes. But I did not want to be the man who reminded you of your past. I wanted to be the man who helped you build your future." I stared at him. The irony, the symmetry, the almost poetic justice of it all, it was too much, and somehow not enough. Lucas Foster, the man who had unknowingly given me back my life, had also been the man who financially destroyed the one who tried to ruin it. But he had never used that power against me. He had never used it at all, and that more than anything proved who he truly was. That night, for the first time, I let go of the last thread of fear. I told him I loved him. I meant it. And when he asked me to marry him a month later in the garden of the Chicago Botanic Garden, beneath a trellis of blooming roses, I said yes. Not because I needed saving, but because I had finally saved myself. ChatGPT John Noy. We planned a small, intimate wedding with just 30 guests, a deliberate contrast to the extravagant affair I once envisioned with Derek. This time there were no crystal chandeliers or imported orchids, no magazine photographers or press releases. Just people who loved us, who had shown up when it mattered. My father walked me down the aisle with a steadiness in his step I had not seen in years, whispering, "You deserve every bit of this joy, kiddo." Lucas's vows were simple, raw, and honest. "I promise to honor your past, cherish your present, and believe in our future, even when it scares us." There were tears, but not the kind that come from pain. These were the kind that wash away years of bitterness. After the ceremony, my mother pulled me aside, and with a gentle but hopeful tone, encouraged me to invite Sabrina. "Maybe this is the bridge," she said, "the beginning of something better." Against every instinct, I sent the invitation. Sabrina replied with a cold 2-line email. "Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, Derek and I have prior obligations. Best wishes." There was no apology, no warmth, just distance. I read it twice before deleting it. The day passed without her, and honestly, it was better that way. For once, nothing felt polluted. Lucas and I built a life together in Chicago. We purchased a brownstone in need of love and we spent weekends repainting walls and sanding floors side by side. It was not perfect, but it was ours. He supported my promotion to vice president with a quiet pride never overshadowing me, never shrinking my light. His own firm thrived too. He began mentoring women-led startups, determined to change the toxic landscape he had once climbed through. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in a true partnership. And just as I began to believe nothing could touch our peace, my mother's voice cracked over the phone one Sunday afternoon. "Hannah, I have cancer. I have." The word landed like a weight on my chest. It was aggressive. It had already spread. Lucas flew with me to Boston the next day. My father looked older than I remembered, slumped in the hospital chair, like the wind had been knocked out of him. My mother tried to smile, but her eyes told the truth. I took a leave from work and moved into their house, cooking soups, organizing medications, helping her bathe. Lucas came every weekend, staying late into the night, holding me while I cried into his shirt. One afternoon, as I adjusted her pillow and tucked the blankets under her feet, she looked at me and whispered, "I wish you and Sabrina could find peace. Life's too short for this silence." I swallowed hard. "I know. Promise me you'll try. Not for her. For you. For me." I nodded, not knowing if I meant it. But I would give her peace, even if I could not find it myself. 3 days later, she died with my hand in hers. The funeral was scheduled for the following week. I knew Sabrina would come. And I knew deep down that some confrontations are unavoidable. Some reckonings have to happen, even if they break your heart again. The morning of my mother's funeral was thick with rain and memory. I stood in front of the mirror in my childhood bedroom, fastening the simple black dress she always loved on me, brushing away tears that refused to stop. Downstairs, my father sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly into a cold cup of coffee, his grief hollowing him out. At 72, he looked a decade older than he had just a month ago. Lucas came up behind me in the mirror's reflection, straightening his tie, placing both hands gently on my shoulders. "I am right here, Hannah," he said. "Whatever happens today, we face it together." We arrived at the funeral home early, the casket draped in white roses and surrounded by photos from all eras of her life, smiling, laughing, holding us as children. Guests began trickling in, old neighbors, distant cousins, my mother's book club friends, former co-workers. Then a hush fell over the room. Sabrina entered, holding Derek's arm. Her black dress was designer, her hair perfectly styled, and on her finger sparkled the same ring I once wore. My stomach flipped. My father tensed beside me, his jaw tightening, but said nothing. They approached slowly. Sabrina's eyes met mine with a strange mix of guilt and defensiveness. "Hannah," she said softly, "it has been a long time." I nodded, unsure if my voice would cooperate. "Too long." "We're sorry for your loss." Derek added his words robotic. Lucas was off speaking with the funeral director, so when Sabrina leaned in and whispered, "I need to talk to you privately," I hesitated before nodding. We stepped into a side room meant for mourners needing space. She closed the door behind us. Up close, I saw it tired eyes, heavy makeup stress etched into her skin. "You look thin," she said, eyeing me. "Grief does that," I replied. "Where's Derek?" I asked. "Outside taking a call." "Always taking a call." She let out a shaky breath. "I am leaving him, Hannah. I should have left years ago, but I was ashamed and scared." I said nothing. It was never worth it. None of it. Not the house, not the vacations. He is not the man I thought he was. I betrayed you for someone who controlled me, broke me, and as Lucas stepped beside me. Later that night, as rain tapped gently against the window of my childhood bedroom, I opened a drawer and pulled out my mother's journal. The final line read, "I pray my girls find their way back to each other. Maybe one day, Mom. Not today. But maybe." If you have ever been betrayed by family and still found the strength to rebuild, share your story in the comments. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more stories of betrayal, justice, and healing.